Just want to go straight across to John Spencer, U.S. military expert. Tom Cooper is also here with us. Thank you, John Spencer, for taking out the time and being a little more patient than we would expected you to be, because it is about 6 minutes into your time. So I'm just going to ask you fundamentally this. The U.S. the U.S. government has decided, and of course the Israelis have decided, that they're going to use the aerial route to soften up the Iranian regime. Will this be enough? Will this be enough to affect regime change and attain the goals that Trump has now defined? Or do you need boots on the ground or some other sort of intervention?
I would say, of course, predictions are really hard, but it's very unlikely that air power alone in this context would achieve that. And that's why a lot of the strategy has been to talk to the Iranian people and for this popular uprising as a byproduct, because there are very few historical cases of air power alone causing a regime change, whether it's Serbia, Milosevic, or Libya, different contexts as whole. Although this morning there is a very credible report that Israel struck the Supreme Council that was trying to elect a new Ayatollah. That will have a considerable impact. But I think the intent here is to paralyze the regime. War is a act of force to compel your enemy to do your will. That's what I think we're seeing here, not a direct strategy to cause a regime change, and I think the president has said this, as well as Secretary of Defense, set the conditions for a regime change. And just about your video, I've seen multiple reports from those in Tel Aviv that say that's an AI-generated fake video.
Yeah, it could be, because it just does look very, very fake. I mean, I've not heard. Yes, just too much. It looks fake to me, and it just doesn't add up. Because by now, I mean, we would have had statements from Netanyahu. You would have had a fair bit of reaction coming out of Israel. That did look catastrophic, to be honest, Tom. But do you agree roughly with what John is saying?
Essentially, yes. I would just add that as to me, it's obvious that Trump has miscalculated, and his 3-day special military operation has ended exactly like the one by Putin in Ukraine. That's all I can add in this regard.
That's the question that we were debating, John Spencer, before we came out to you. That is this going to be one of those pointless exercises where we are going to get embroiled in a war that's really not going anywhere spectacular, a war without end, without really a closing story?
I don't think so. I do a lot of comparative analysis as well, and I wrote the case on the Battle of Kyiv when Putin took his shot. Had Putin had the capability to eliminate Zelensky, all the senior military figures or any personality in the push of a button, Putin didn't have that capability. While he tried this almost the attack of Baghdad type of approach on Kyiv to do a psychological impact. That's the context. A little different if you look at Iran, even if what was happening in January with the conditions of the internal stability, right? The internal stability of the population, the economic situation, the water situation, all of those variables. Now, whether, again, I don't think it'll be a forever war. I think this is actually trying to end a forever war and change the behavior of the Islamic regime. Of course, take away capabilities of the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, of the Navy's threat to the Straits of Hormuz. Every war has to look at its context. Whether this is a futile effort, I don't think so. Even if it's, if anything, you have set the conditions for a different paradigm to be in place, one that Israel and the United States will strike any threat coming from the regime going forward. I think that's a decades-long paradigm that is being broken, and it's always a pursuit of political goal. All wars pursues a political goal. What's the goal, which is everybody keeps asking, whether that goal of regime change is the intent of the operation. And if you look at even Putin's special military operation, his intent was to instill a more Russian-friendly government. He failed to do that. And now, of course, goals can change, and that's happened. I think for this operation, the goals have been pretty clear. We're all questioning whether that ultimate goal of regime change can happen with the current ends, ways, and means kind of that's being given. I think we're in a wait and see. I mean, we're only 4 days, a few days into the operation, and to have 50 plus of all of the old way of thinking happening in Iran, not just the Ayatollah, but 40 senior commanders of that hardliners. I don't think anybody can tell you like how's this going to go, given the variety of context that is the Iran basically.
Okay, so how are you assessing the timelines here? Because we're seeing evidence of a large number of strikes on Iran. We've had one on the spiritual headquarters in Qom. And we're not seeing the Iranian regime throw in the towel. What does that tell you?
Again, it's with the amount of information, despite all of our open source intelligence, it's hard to know. Of course, we know from the Iranian constitution that meeting that was being held was to elect a new Ayatollah. The fact that all of the generals were taken out, of course, we believe there were plans put in place for such a scenario, and that's why you have possibly this, what I would say is just irrational behavior of attacking all of the Gulf states and basically these 14 different states and basically isolating yourself. We don't really know who's in charge, who's making the decisions. So it's hard to say whether the current kind of decapitation campaign, the paralysis of this operation, which is historic. And you look back at even American operations in the past, the invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, any of them, we've just never had this deep intelligence infiltration, precision ability no military has. This is really historic. So the outcomes of predicting of it, there is no comparative case to say, well, this will likely lead to this. I think we're still in a wait and see who's in charge, what happens next. I don't think the airstrikes will taper off. The United States president said that you haven't even seen the biggest day or the biggest basically airstrikes. Even if you look back to the Persian Gulf 42-day war, the United States did 160,000 sorties, 250,000 bombs and missiles over 43 days to change the behavior of then Saddam Hussein in invasion of Kuwait. And it led to a positive outcome, which is, again, why we have to debate the goals.
Well, that's debatable. I mean, Saddam went, yes, you captured him, you hung him, but we saw what Iraq turned into. So if you want it to be a less radicalized state, then perhaps something more needs to be done than just sort of cutting the head of the snake, because this is a hydra we're talking about, not really a snake. So you cut off one head and 10 more appear. So anyhow, look, I mean,
that's not what I was talking about, right? I'm not talking about the 2003. I'm talking about changing the behavior, right? This is why you have to look at what the goals of the war are, stated by those participants, belligerents of it. We don't have a voice right now.
So you believe that this action will be enough to deter the Iranians from ever contemplating making a nuclear weapon again, or even exporting terror as they have done?
I can't make that decision. According to even the last of the negotiator Witkoff, that the old people were not willing to negotiate that, and that's why again if you want that level of a goal of behavior change, this is the ideal that you have one voice in Iran and the possibilities, right? It's hard for, even if it's 90% of the population, to rise up if they don't have arms, right? Even if you go back to the 79 revolution, the Air Force joined the revolution. So that is a complication. No, I don't think we're at the point right now where we believe this would change the behavior. And that's why you keep eliminating the leadership and the hardliners, to where is this going to create the byproduct of regime change to really get them to changing that behavior, or would they come to the negotiation table, which the president said, I'm willing to negotiate again, but it's going back to kind of like the Ukraine Russia. What is negotiation? You can't negotiate away survival, a sovereignty. This is very specific to the goal, just like Kuwait was. Stop invading other countries. In this case would be to give up that nuclear program. I would not say we're there yet. No.
Well, don't forget, viewers, that the Iranians, by some accounts, offered, in fact, to give up their program. And they said that we accept all sorts of inspections. So, well, look, I mean, all of this now doesn't really matter. What matters is where are we going to go with this war? What is the end point? And I think we're getting some views on that. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much.